Today we're doing a repair on this fiberglass bodied Corvette. The car's actually come to us from a good friend of ours who's a panel beater, very skilled when it comes to doing the metal work. But fiberglass work, not his forte. Bit like me, can do it, has done it.
Doesn't want to do it.
He's no expert in it. If you're not familiar with the Corvettes, you're talking steel frames, chassis with stylish curved fiberglass body on the top. And this poor gentleman here basically got run into, we believe, by a garbage truck. It's completely broken off the bottom, what you'd probably describe as like a side skirt, and broken the front fender, put a big cracks in it, and totally mangalated the door. So Brett's going to grind back all of the paintwork and get down to the real bones of it, the real core of the fiberglass, and then show you some of the process of how the repair actually comes together.
So we've got some fractures, some cracks, light damage. The door's obviously been replaced because it was too far gone. We've got a panel piece here that's been missing that I'll have to graft back in. We have managed to find a second piece, or a piece of another car that we can graft in, rather than having to totally reshape the panel. Here it is. I've just taken the front wheel off this car to have a look on the inside of this car to see how bad the brake is. You can see how the inside of the wheel arch is separated from the original mold. So this is a strengthening section where the body connects to the outside of the car. And this is obviously all broken here too, and down here. So what I've got to do now is I've got to grind all this section here and then reattach it as well. So a bit more extensive. I've also found another brake here as well. You see how this now moves? Because you can't actually get to the back of that repair from the inside. There's another section there. So we'll have to glass that from the front as well. I finished grinding up this Corvette. Just so you know, letting you know what I've used to do this job. So I've got a, I think it's a 6-inch or 9-inch Velcro grinder with a 40 grit pad. I've got a little belt sander, again with a 40 grit, little right angle, I think it's a 30 or 40 millimeter hair sander as well, again with a 40 grit sandpaper. Got my mask, earmuffs, goggles obviously. Fiberglass dust goes everywhere. If you don't have a big grinder, you can get away with doing this job with a little 6-inch grinder. That's a fiberglass disc that's on that, by the way, sander. Or even just a little fiberglass, or even a regular sanding flat disc will be okay. But the coarser the sandpaper, the better for this particular job, considering you need obviously the fiberglass to hold onto something. So the coarser, the better. So you can see what I've done here. All this had to be ground back to the fiberglass because all the gel coat was broken. It had little splits or crazes in the bodywork. It's kind of hard to see, but there's some cracks you can see in the paint, which are actually in the gel coat. So if they stay there, they'll keep coming back in your paintwork. So we had to grind gel coat back as well, and I ended up having to put a layer of fiberglass over this whole section. These brakes, I've actually V'd them out. You can't actually see it, but I've actually carved a hollow into them. And then what I'll do is I'll put a patch of fiberglass thicker through here. This is obviously broken through because this was actually stepped out. So I'll put some tape behind this and a bit of timber to hold that out. But these cracks where it's actually broken, I'll put extra glass and try and get it as flat as possible. And over this whole section, I'll put a layer of tissue fiberglass to make sure it stays strong, because then when we sand it and the panel beater puts his bog and his primer or whatever over it, it'll be nice and strong. So all those cracks that were in there, they definitely won't come back.
So we've got different grades of paper here.
It's not paper.
And it's not paper. Oh, look at that face. There it is. That was worth it.
That was worth it.
So yeah, different grades of paper is an easy way to describe what we're talking about here. It's different thicknesses or different weights. So this is
a tissue paper, or tissue, look what you've done. Tissue fiberglass.
Tissue fiberglass is used for
finer details, thinner. That's what we use it for. Put a thin layer over it, gives you the strength, but doesn't give you the height. So we'll use a 600 gram, as you can see, is a lot thicker for the bigger cracks. And make sure we get it as smooth as we can, so there's less sanding and less filling afterward.
The other thing that the tissue is good for is if you're trying to do detail work So that'd be, let's say this for example, where there's a transition of one angle and then the opposite angle. The tissue can be easier to mold into that space because it has less weight to it.
Less rigidity.
It's less thick, less rigid. So you might start with, let's say you're trying to make a mold of this shape here. You might start with the tissue paper as like a first kind of give you a rigid form to work with, and then later on reinforce it with the thicker stuff.
Yep.
To then make your mold.
And to make it stronger.
Yeah.
Use the tissue at the top for the finer details. Less bog, less sanding, less filler.
And because it's also a body, there's a lot of flex and a lot of movement in it.
Yeah, as you can see.
So where that section's been broken, obviously straight away it moves heaps in the broken spot, but is still very rigid down here where it's not broken. So that's just an example of, as soon as those fibers have busted away from each other and they're no longer meshing together properly, it's just weak as in that section.
So this is now dry. It's been overnight since we touched it. What I'm doing now is I'm just trimming off all the edges where the fiberglass will need to be finished off, obviously on a hard edge, so I have to grind that edge off. I have to reshape this down here and reshape this here, and then I've got an 80 grit pad on my Orbi, and then what I'm doing is feathering all this back off to where it was to try and make it as flat as I can. You can see here where I've sanded the top of this, but then there's a line there from where the fiberglass was, where the patches are. So I'll sand all that flat to get it as smooth as possible, ready for a skimmer bog or a polyester spray bog, whatever the panel beater decides to do from there, and then basically block it, prime it, and paint it, and then our repair's done. I've almost done this Corvette, so on this driver side, I had a repair as well I needed to do. This pinch mold seam was all split as well, so a repair like this was similar to the front of the guard on the other side, where I've had to get in the back, sand it all in here, glass the back, ground the front, and then added some fiber filler in the front and sanded it flat to make the shape we needed. The back guard was a bit trickier, I'm not gonna lie. So I had to do it in multiple sections because obviously there was multiple breaks. So there was this piece here which was separate, which I had to do first and then sort of stick into place. Same with down here, as you can see, to glue it all back together. There was a join here, so this piece is new, this piece is new, this piece is existing. And then all this in here was all regrafted, was also redone. So I'll sand this like I have to the front guard, down to 80 grit, just so it's all nice and feathered off, ready for actual final filler. And then basically that's that. That's how we do our fiberglass repairs. It's time consuming, it's dusty, it's messy, but that's the best way to do it. So the key thing is just to make sure everything is sanded and clean, just like paint prep or anything else that you do, really. Thank you.